because a lot of people have been doing a lot of work in this, and I've been on the outers trying to organise a few bits and pieces. But it sort of seeded back in 2021. Our esteemed workmate Leanne Wood, in front of you there, came up with a great idea around a way of unearthing young people's thinking through a creative process called photo voice. And the focus for this was, we were talking at the time about a new building that we wanted to put together to address homelessness in the Logan region. There's very much a lack of housing for young people at risk in the 16 to 25-year-old age group. And we wanted to do something in that space to make a real dent in that need. And to make it real, to make it targeted and going in the right direction, we wanted young people's input into what that would look like. The focus then sort of turned to a wider consultation around homelessness and what does home look like, or what should home look like. So after initial consultations and meetings with Leanne and a few other stakeholders, we decided it was time to get us some real street cred. And to do that, we met with Dr. Karen Parcel from University of Queensland. And after successfully organising fundraising for the project from UQ and from Anglicare, we enlisted the services of Dr. Rose and Dr. Stephanie, which was one of our best moves ever. And to make the project happen on Anglicare's side, we got Vicky Kelly, Coordinator of Instinct Youth Services in Cleveland, Tanya Locke, who's the Coordinator of Instinct Youth Services in Beenleigh and Markrabat, and Tani Ledgerwood from Anglicare's Intensive Bail Support Services, all together, and we started looking at how we would engage young people in this process. We also enlisted the help of Anglicare's practice teams where we could for their input. So from there, I will hand over to the next speaker, which might be who's next? Hands up.
It's me.
Dr. Steph.
Thanks, Reese, for the excellent introduction. And before I take it from there, I also would like to acknowledge that we are on unceded land here too, on the behalf of the University of Queensland. And in our case, where we live, work, play, and study, that's the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people. So I think a lot of the stuff that I was going to give you as a background, you probably know just as well as we do. So youth homelessness and housing affordability are two related things. They can't be separated from one another. And just to give a little bit of context of the magnitude of the problem, Anglicare is, for example, conducting a yearly snapshot where they review rentals and their affordability for people who receive various welfare payments. And in the most recent one in 2024, there would not have been one single rental listing that would have been affordable for a young person receiving youth allowance. And it's not surprising to us then that we see that those aged 12 to 24 years make up a large proportion of people experiencing homelessness, and even more so, people of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background are overrepresented. In that way, what is important for us is not only homelessness, but in combination with affecting young people who are in such a crucial transitional stage in their lives, the detrimental impacts of homelessness really coalesce and accumulate and affect people even more so. So where we're coming at with photo voice, and Reese already talked a little bit about this, is just the understanding that people don't only live their experiences, but they also have a fair bit of knowledge about their experience, that they have expertise, they have important things to say about their lives that should inform decisions and how we produce knowledge that can inform policy and practice. But at the same time, we also know that this is very often not happening, that the young people who are affected by these decisions are often not part of the process of making these decisions or producing research. So photo voice is something that was actually developed in the context of homelessness, and it comes at it from the understanding that you can use photography to support storytelling and to get especially young people to engage in creative activities that will help advocacy work and ultimately, hopefully, systems change. So basically what we're doing is we're seeing this part of a larger drive to acknowledge the rights of the child as enshrined in the UN Convention, that young people have a right to express their views on matters that impact their lives, and that their views are being given due weight in accordance with their age and their maturity. Photo voice is just a vehicle to accomplish that. It's not a purpose in and of itself. So that's where our project's coming in. And Reese has already given you a bit of a background of how it happened, and I would like to just tell you a bit more about the objectives of it. So there was threefold, and basically we're looking for empowerment, understanding, and advocacy. They're all being given equal weight. So empowerment comes back to the idea that young people should share their stories and perspectives, not only on homelessness, but also what home means to them. So we can provide better for them to produce conditions that, if they're not replacing a home, but they resemble a home and they give some aspects of home and the security that the home brings. Understanding. So we want to understand more what it's like for them. And that doesn't mean that we are presuming that we will always, or that we will fully understand these experiences, but we at least want to produce insights that give us then some idea of what do we need to do to develop facilities that are fit for purpose, and that can feed into the process of right now putting together a proposal for a transitional youth facility that takes the meanings of home for young people into account. And the third component, advocacy, is really then the strength of photo voice, because we're producing something that is not just text or testimonials, but we see something that is visually tangible. And we will get to that in the second part. Rose will show you some of the images and hopefully whet the appetite a little bit for you to either see them at one of the events when they're in display, or check out the online gallery if you haven't done so already. Now, that led to two broad research questions. The first one is, how do young people experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness use photography as a way of understanding their experiences and make meaning of home? And the second one related to that is then, how can the photographs and stories from young people inform service delivery, advocacy, and the design of a youth transition facility? And for that is something where probably Tani and Vicky will tell you a little bit more from what it looked like on their end, because as has been said before, it's been a huge collaborative effort. These projects, they don't just happen. It's not just a couple of photographs that are being taken, but a lot of it was facilitated by Anglicare in the work on the ground to set up the project and to recruit and support young people in their contribution to the project. So they employed a deliberate and inclusive approach to participant selection. That means that we were looking for participants reflecting various experiences and backgrounds, and where people also bring a certain degree of enthusiasm to the work, while at the same time making sure that everything needs to be voluntary and consented by the young people, that they have the chance to withdraw from the project without putting their relationship with Anglicare at risk. So the young people that ultimately were recruited in the project were supported through two ASQ in-sync sites, the one at Cleveland and Beenleigh. And overall, we had 14 young people who participated in the study to varying degrees. So we made it clear from the very beginning that just because you come to one workshop or you have a conversation doesn't mean that you're also committing to doing all the other things that you're asked to do. So we wanted to keep that up to the young people to honor the commitment that it's about the young people's voices. So 9 young people contributed photographs, and 8 young people came to 1 or 2 of the analytical workshops that we had to discuss the photographs and caption them and prepare them for the exhibition. And we also built in a little component to be able to reflect on the process, how people felt about how everything went, and if they felt that their voices were adequately represented or included. And we had one young person coming back to talk to us about their experiences with the actual research project. Now, it all started with 2 workshops at the beginning, and one of them in Beenleigh, the other one in Cleveland. And these workshops were really, really crucial for what came afterwards. It was the idea to explain to young people what it is that we're proposing to do, which we can't assume that this photo voice idea is something that is necessarily known to everybody already. So there was a lot of work to do that just to explain what photo voice is and what the role of young people is in the project. And to that end, we just brought along an example. So we had just recently completed another project, including participant-produced photography, and we showed participants some photographs which had 2 purposes. One of it was to show them, to take the pressure off, that we're not looking for photographs necessarily that can go and be put up in a gallery straight away and win arts prizes. We wanted to emphasize the experience and meaning over the pressure of producing something that is visual aesthetics that are award-winning. Although I think in the end what we did get, there are a fair few candidates there that might be competitive. And we wanted to encourage people to find their own visual voices. We did bring in a very acclaimed professional photographer that helped with the hands-on training and some tips and tricks on tapping into the creative potential of the young people, which my impression at least was that they really latched onto that and enjoyed this very, very much. But we also talked about a little bit about the ethical considerations, so the do's and don'ts, and being aware of safety and surroundings that we need to take into account when we're using visual storytelling techniques. And overall, just to comply with ethics and to make sure that people really understood what they're asked to do and they're happy to do it, we also use this as the occasion to sign the informed consent and progress with the project. And I realize there's a bit of complexity here, so we will have time later to ask questions if there's anything that you want to know about the process. But for now, I think that's just a broad overview that you get an idea of what we did. Now, the idea with the workshop was also to come up with a title and a theme for the photography assignment. And what crystallized quite quickly is this question around what does home look and feel like for you as the participant, as something to take in mind as you walk away from the workshop and start taking photographs. So this one was articulated gradually and then opened up for revision and proposed to the young people, who did not object to making that the guiding prompt for their photography. And with that, I think I would like to hand over to Rose, who will tell you a little bit more about what happened next.
Thanks, Steffa. I'll just try and take control. Wonderful. Okay, so let's move on. So the young people went out with their smartphones and their photography skills that they developed at the workshops with the 2 professional photographers that we had. And they were inspired by the prompt and took photos of things that happen in their everyday life that reminded them of what it feels like, what home looks like and feels like for them. I think it was about a bit over a month that they had, and then we invited the young people to come back for, there was 2 analytical workshops. The young people were invited to upload their photos onto Google Drive. And then we did the first workshop in Cleveland, and then there was a second one in Beenleigh. So the idea of these workshops is basically to work as a group and go through the photographs and do analytical work, the same sort of analytical work as researchers that we do. We invite the photographers to join us as co-researchers and really engage quite deeply, really, with the photographs and the concepts that the young people were playing with. So if these workshops, none of the young, or not many of the young people had uploaded them onto Google Drive, so we spent a bit of time at the beginning uploading them onto Google Drive. We had Anglicare staff, they were there supporting the young people, but they stayed out of the room. So it was just Steffa and I and the young people together doing these analytical workshops. And the young people were provided food, and they were provided reimbursements for honorariums to value their time and their perspectives. Really, that's what that's all about. So we came together. We also had conversations about informed consent. So young people gave informed consent before at the introductory workshops that Steph was talking about, before they went out and took their photographs. But informed consent is a really ongoing practice. It's not something that we take once and then we assume it continues for the rest of the project. It's something that we constantly revisit. And so we revisited it again before the beginning of the analytical workshops, just to check in with everybody and make sure everybody was okay with what we were about to do and were comfortable with it, but also to get their informed consent to record the workshops. In this particular instance, we did have a young person who didn't want to be recorded. And not just I don't want my contributions to be in part of the transcript. So they didn't want to be redacted. There was no recordings at all. And I'm highlighting that for two reasons. Firstly, when I get to the photographs and I start drawing on young people's stories, just to point out that these are paraphrasing from the field notes that Steph and I took during these workshops, but also to really highlight how important it is within this sort of research to be fluid and to really take seriously what informed consent. And if we're talking about people's voices and respecting their voices, then that occurs in all sorts of different ways. So it made Steph and my job a little bit harder, but it was more important to respect the young people and how they wanted to participate more than anything else. So in these workshops, basically we have an acronym and a set of questions that help guide us through the photographs. So we would pick a photograph at a time. We would, they used a projector of sorts. I think Reese had to come in and help us with it because Steph and I had no idea what we were doing. And it went up on the whiteboard, and each young person took it in turns to introduce the group. This is my photograph, this is what it is about. And then slowly as a group, we interrogated and unpacked the photograph together. So sometimes we followed these questions in order, sometimes it got mixed up. It was more about following the young people's lead. Steph and I were purely there to facilitate, and it was about them having a conversation amongst themselves about what was this photograph, what does this mean in terms of how do we think about home, experiences of homelessness, and the like. So really emphasizing here that, again, it's about the young people and how they're making sense of it, and our role is to follow them and support that rather than rigidly following a set of questions. So to give you an idea of what that looks like, I've got a work example. Here we go. So this photograph is from a young person, Joseph, and he came up with the title, Past the Tipping Point. So the photograph gets projected on the screen, and I ask Joseph, can you show me what's happening here? The first question. And so that's a description of the photograph. And so Joseph told us that he has a bucket, there is water in the bucket, but it's close to the top, but it's not quite there. It's not overflowing. And there's crisper jeans in the background. And then we ask him, well, what's happening here? Like, what's this photograph about? And so he starts taking it from the literal and gets more into the symbolism of it. And he talks about how the water symbolized emotions. And it's near the edge, but it's not overflowing. And that's because we have these emotions inside us that we have to keep inside us, and we have to perform them in a particular sort of way. And he talks about the crisp jeans as being like a clean, well-dressed sort of the way you're supposed to present yourself. And then we move from Joseph's understanding of the photographs, and we invite the group of young people to come into the conversation, and what do they see and what do they think? How does this impact our lives? And so we go from Joseph's individual story to other people's interpretations of that story. So for the group, for this particular story, there was a lot of conversation around having emotions that aren't socially acceptable and having to hide those emotions and acting in a way that makes other people comfortable and not necessarily being true to themselves and how they feel and what's going on for their lives. So they talked about the difference between what they need to do and how they need to feel and what they're allowed to be. And in the last often with the last 3 questions, because you kind of start with the individual and then each question kind of takes you out, and from the micro going out to the more macro issues, the more social issues. And those questions about how do we educate people, what do we want to do about it, often they kind of get quite muddled. And they did in this conversation. And the young people started talking about, well, what emotions are we trying to hide? And they talked a lot about anger, and they talked a lot about rage, and they shared a little bit. There was no oversharing in terms of really, I suppose, putting themselves into vulnerable positions and sharing too much of their story. The young people were very, they took charge of their stories, and they knew what they wanted to share and what they didn't. And Steph and I had no concerns in that sense. But they did talk about, you know, one person in particular, I can see her very clearly saying, I'm angry, and I'm angry at my dad. I'm angry at what my dad did to me. And so the question is, well, what do you want us to do about it? And her answer was, I want a rage room. I want to be able to express these feelings and get them out of my body. Because this society might not want me to express them, but I need to. So that's an example of how we worked and through the process of analysing these photographs to get them from the literal of what's happening to expanding into more social structural issues of what's going on, which is exactly what we do as researchers when we do an analysis. As Steph has said before, when we get to the end, if you have any more questions about this, please feel free to ask. So after the first 2 workshops, actually, no, sorry, it was at the end of the second workshop, we asked the young people, do you have any sense of a way to categorize these photographs and the things that we've been talking about into sort of themes or threads? And the conversation started with the young people, and then Steph and I later on clarified them into 3 neater categories. And the first one is living and feeling at home. So this is a photograph as an example of this kind of theme or thread around living and feeling at home. And it's called The Mess Can Wait by Harmony. So for Harmony, when she talked about this photograph, she really got into the nitty-gritties of pointing out, look at that Chinese container, look how you can see the fork in there, look how you can still see the food. She talked about how she put the cup in a certain position and made sure that you could see the lip marks on it, and you could tell that it had been used and it hadn't been washed. So for Harmony, the way that she positioned the objects in a photograph, the way she set it up in the perspective was really important part of her explaining, you know, what's being shown here. And I highlight this photo because it's very literal, and we'll see with the other photographs that we get a little bit more abstract. But for Harmony, this was about, you know, home looks like and feels like for her somewhere where she can relax about rules and routines, and she doesn't have to worry. So when you're in a share house, when you're in a transitional home, there are rules that everybody has to abide, particularly around cleaning up after yourself. But if you have a home that's just your own, you can leave the mess out, you know, because you make your own rules in your own home. But more importantly, the mess can wait because you'll be back tomorrow because you have stable housing and somewhere to come back to. So that was a really important part of that some of the young participants talked about in terms of this, the safety and security of what living and feeling at home is like. The next photograph we have here is half a drawing and half a photograph. So it's Prisoner of the Mind by Alicia, and it's a part of the second thread or theme, which is struggle, life does not make sense. Alicia actually started drawing this in the first analytical workshop, and she asked me if she could include it. You know, it's not a photograph, but can I use it? And the answer is, well, of course. If this is how you express your story and yourself, it might be called photo voice, but why can't you use a drawing? And she's a very talented artist as well. So for her, it's split. She has the sleeping bag on the ground, the example of rough sleeping of where she was. And then she's living in a house at the time. And so she's safe. She's got a roof over her head, but there's still drugs, there's still alcohol. So it's still unstable in that sense. But she also has the trauma and the struggle lingering in terms of her mental health and what she's trying to cope and work through. And that's being depicted in this photograph. So you can see there's her reflection in one of the windows. Another one of the windows is broken. Another one has boards covering it up to give this sense of, I guess, of struggling and unsettlement, and there's still things lingering that need to be worked through. The final theme was belonging, growing up too fast. So something that kept coming out with the young people was these difficulties that they had having to make choices that were way beyond them that they didn't want to make, or that there were so many choices available to them that they felt they couldn't really make choices that other people could make because they didn't have a stable home, because of all these other issues going on in their life, because they had to grow up too fast. So this is from Chloe. Chloe wanted her name written in Korean in the study, and it's called Compass. And again, Chloe picked the title for this one. And this one's a little bit more abstract. I mean, you can see a compass in the photograph. It's really quite clever, this one. I like it. And for Chloe, this one was about, home for her is having other people who look out for you and act as role models. And it feels like a place where it's safe to make mistakes and learn from them as a part of growing up. And she talked a lot about, and the group talked a lot about these difficulties in making choices, of being able to make mistakes in a safe space. And, they make mistakes and it has all these other consequences. Whereas if I'd made a similar mistake when I was younger, it wouldn't have had the similar sort of consequences to them. And so the importance of safety and security and just being able to be young and to grow up without having to grow up so fast was a really important theme as well. So altogether, the question was, how does home look like and feel like for you? And so, of course, the importance of home comes through really strongly. And this happens a lot in research, where what our research actually finds confirms what we already know. But what's so powerful about this study is it isn't adults saying this is what it should be. It's the young people saying, no, this is what we really want because this is what's happening in our lives. This last photograph is from Anonymous. It's grocery shopping. So some of the participants took photos and didn't come to the analytical workshops. And this is an example of one participant who decided to participate in that sort of way. And I think this is an incredibly powerful photograph. It's the positionality of it, the story that she's telling, or they are telling, sorry, really highlights both the physical elements of home, shelter, sleeping bag, but also those non-physical elements, those emotional elements that we all need. Mum off drugs, dad to be happy, hope, things to be okay. And I just think the whole exhibition, so many of the threads are tied in to this one photograph, and so we really wanted to show it at the end. I hope that's been interesting and I've talked through the themes. And please, like I said, if you have any questions, ask us at the end. There is a link there to the online gallery if you haven't been on to see all of the photographs, because they are all incredible in their own way. As Stefan mentioned before, we didn't emphasize the importance of aesthetics, but yet the young people really took it on themselves and have created some really quite beautiful looking artifacts, and really quite powerful too when you match them up with their stories. And we've just got some photos here of the exhibition, and was launched on October the 27th at the station. And I know that it's been exhibited at the moment at the bottom of Duncan Street, and there are plans to continue to share these young people voices to an array of different audiences. So yeah, so now I'd like to hand it over, if I may, to Tani and Vicky to talk about the project from their perspectives, but also, I guess, to get more of the process and what it was like working behind the scenes. So thank you, and over to Vicky or Tani.
Vicky, you can go first if you'd like. Yeah, happy to do that. Thanks, Tani. So hi, I'm Vicky. I am coordinator and a caseworker down here at Cleveland InSync. So we work with young people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, hence how we came to be involved in this process. When we were first approached to become involved in the Photo Voice project, to be honest, there was a bit of reluctance. We're pretty busy down here, lots going on in the youth homelessness sector. And so while it seemed like a good idea, we as caseworkers just weren't sure that we would be able to give the time up to do it properly, and whether or not it would be worth it. And let's be honest, sometimes getting a bunch of teenagers task is a bit like herding cats. But we were excited to be invited and decided that we would work together to make it happen. And so logistics aside, it did happen, and we did feel that it was a really overwhelmingly positive experience for both the young people and the staff that were involved as well. Yeah, so it was quite time consuming and there was a lot involved. Because InSync is split into 3 services, so I'm here in Cleveland, and then there's also Mankravat and Beenleigh. So we had to juggle the need to get the young people from the different sites all together in one space. So that, of course, involved making sure that staff were able to transport them around, to drive them to and from. That included working outside of hours for us here, particularly at Cleveland, because we do, finish at 5. And it was also, we had to feed the young people, of course, so we had to make sure that there was enough food, adequate space, and just being there as backup to the facilitators. In terms of attendance, some of the young people dropped out after the first session, others stayed and had limited involvement, and the remainder threw themselves into the task. I know here at Cleveland we had 6 young people, 4 of whom continued throughout. So we had 2 that stopped attending after the first couple of meetings. One of them decided that he wasn't really interested in the process, and the other one struggled with transport. He lives quite away from the office. He actually lives on one of the southern Moreton Bay Islands. And so, having to get a ferry home and that afterwards was quite difficult for him. We had another young person who did attend all of the sessions but wasn't really actively involved in the process. Didn't really provide any feedback as to why, but that's okay. And then we had 3 others that stayed on and were quite invested. They attended each session, they were actively involved in the process, and they all submitted several photos. Those 3 seem to really appreciate the process of being heard. They certainly enjoyed the creative side of the project, and they could see the long-term impact, which was really good, and they felt really empowered and from memory, I think Mankravat and Beenleigh probably had similar experiences. They had some that started and others that saw it through completely. The presentation of the photos at the end of the process was highly enjoyable, and gave the young people who attended the opportunity to see their work on display, the opportunity to talk about their experiences of homelessness, and the process of being involved in Photo Voice, and also the chance to connect and engage with community members. So I wasn't able to attend that, but I know that some of the young people and a couple of the other caseworkers went, and everyone, they had a great night. So while not all of them were able to get to the final event, we do believe that each of them got value out of the process, and certainly speaking to them about the experience. The common theme was that of being heard, of sharing their journey in a creative way, and normalising those journeys as well. And I must say, another unexpected outcome outside of the end product of Photo Voice was the relationships that were created. So some of the young people have gone on to cement friendships with other young people that they met during the program. And that, of course, helps them to build that supportive community among their own peers that are facing the same challenges that they are. And another unexpected outcome was it gave us as caseworkers really invaluable insight into what some of the young people that we're working with are going through, and it opened some really great conversations between the young people and us as workers, and like I said, just gave us invaluable insight into what's going on for them. From a staff point of view, again, it was a great opportunity to get the young people together. We love being surrounded by these amazing young people that we work with. Working towards a common goal was great, and sharing their experiences of homelessness and the impact it has on their identity, their sense of worth, and their overall well-being. And again, it allowed us to have a better understanding of the issues surrounding homelessness in general, as well as their own personal experiences, and gave us an opportunity to connect with them on a different level. It was great to see them having the opportunity to be creative, and to have a voice and feel empowered by the process. In the end, it was well worth the time, and we were really pleased that we did commit to it, and that we did make it happen. Yeah, and just general feedback from both staff and young people was that it was a positive and enjoyable opportunity, and the fact that it may result in some constructive change and some good outcomes in terms of the new build, and that some of their ideas and experiences may be taken into account. It was really good for the young people as well. So thank you. That's
Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you.
So I'm Tani, so I'm Service Manager for our Youth Justice Services. So in this program, it was the intensive bail initiatives from both Logan and Gold Coast. So just really quickly, I'll go through originally, so I guess some of the barriers that we saw with some of our young people. So our young people, I guess, are quite disengaged, and very relational based in regards to engaging with their youth workers. So some of the barriers was in regards to getting them to these workshops and getting to these things because they had to have a specific youth worker come with them. So that was a real barrier for them. We also just even basically most of the young people that we did engage for this program were at the time experiencing primary homelessness. So they were living in tents and really unstable housing. So even in regards to having the resources to take a photo and have a camera or have a phone, that was a bit of a barrier. So we had to have a youth worker with them at all times when doing that have a smartphone or something to be able to actually take the photo with. And I guess, as I said, it was around that primary homelessness. So they were quite transient young people in regards to their homelessness, but also in regards to going in and out of custody within the time that we were going through this program. So some of them might have been in custody and then come out, so missed some of the process that we were going through. It was also the reluctance and ability to get them to the workshop. So they missed a lot of the really hardy conversations and the lead up to it as well. And I guess that some of that's around the reluctance to go into groups and to go into bigger social settings. We did very much, though, see our young people that did engage at different touch points go through quite a journey through this. So initially there was lots of conversations around confusion. How do we look at home? How do we express that when potentially that's not a positive experience we've had? And how do we portray that? Because when we look at what home looks like, it hasn't been positive, it hasn't been nice. So how do we portray that? But also how do we envision what that would look like if it was a better experience for us in home? So there was lots of confusion around what that looked like for them. There was also lots of shame involved. We found once we unpacked things, our young people that were experiencing homelessness at that time, homelessness is very much hidden. So where we look at where we even position them when they're in their tents within community, it's in places where they're not seen by people because they need to remain hidden, otherwise they can't stay there and they get moved along. So homelessness is always taught to them through society as it's something to be shameful of, it's something that needs to be hidden. And here we were asking them to take photos of it and portray it to the world and be vulnerable and show that this is your experience. So we did find that was lots of conversations around how do we get past this and what does this look like for you and why is this shame involved and how to express that. As Rose spoke to just previously around some of the anonymous photos, some of them were from our service. We did do lots of unpacking in what that was as well. And some of that came down to our young people who engage in offending behaviours are often portrayed a lot in media without their consent and are portrayed a lot through social media, through news, and never really in a positive light. So it seemed to us to be very much a way for them to have some form of power and control around where we're willing to tell our stories, but we actually want some power and control around. We don't want this to be known as who we are. We want to be able to remain anonymous and tell our stories, but keep that to ourselves around who we are. Some of, I guess, the unseen positives that some because we didn't get to go to the showcases and to the exhibitions that people might not have seen was, I guess, some of those really hearty conversations that we had. But probably just a real sense of pride that our young people experienced when we were able to just show them photos of the exhibition, and we were able to share with them how it was being shown. And to have artwork of theirs shown in this sort of space is really something that they would have never experienced, or never thought that someone would want to see what they've done or want to see what they've heard. I guess many of our young people are in a space where they feel like they're not seen by the world. They're hidden away. They're seen, not, their voices aren't heard. They're not seen. For them to be able to see that people are looking at what they're trying to express was really, really powerful. And despite the fact that they didn't get to go to the showcases and to the workshops, they very much still shared in that and still felt that sense of pride and positivity. So that's some of our experiences so far.
Thank you so much to all of you for sharing your experience of that project. That's, yeah, look, it's been really moving and wonderful. We are really running close to time, so I'm not going to open the floor to questions, but I'm sure people have got many. Please contact us afterwards or pop them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we then redirect those to the speakers. We're going to move on really quickly. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Chase Sherwell, who is a research fellow at the UQ Learning Lab and principal research technician for the Compassionate Mind Research Group in the School of Psychology at UQ. Chase is going to talk about, as I said, a new project aiming to co-design a novel compassion training program to help with stress and burnout for staff. He's also going to highlight how that then can be applied within everyday practice to improve outcomes for staff and young people. And this is again with our intensive bail initiative with Tani and others. So Chase, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right? Yep, fantastic. All right, thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I'll try to be rather brief today, but I'm here representing the Compassionate Mind Research Group, which is a research group at the University of Queensland's School of Psychology. And today I'll be talking about our brief compassion training that we're developing for the IBI program. First of all, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet. So for me, that is the Yagara and Turrbal people, and recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. So a little bit of background on how shame and self-criticism can lead to significant psychopathology. So as social animals, we've evolved a highly specialised sense of self that is intrinsically linked to our relationships with others. It's believed that our sense of shame in particular has evolved as a particular internalized emotional response to facilitate social relationships. So shame is a feedback mechanism for when we either have acted in a way that has resulted in negative interpersonal reactions, or when we believe we have acted in a way that might cause interpersonal discord. And prolonged external shame easily translates into internalized self-criticism, and extended periods of exposure to shameful or criticism from others can become our own internal monologue, which over time leads to massive deficits in our ability to regulate emotions and respond appropriately to other people and other stimuli in the external world. Now, in the short term, this can lead to psychopathology such as depression, anxiety, or even occupational burnout, whereas prolonged exposure developmentally can lead to kind of prolonged hypervigilance and risk-taking. It can also lead to more competitive or antisocial social mentalities, and at its extreme can lead to kind of these manifestations of callous or unemotional personality traits over time. And social and clinical psychology have described how compassion is the most powerful protective factor against this kind of pathogenic self-criticism and shame. Paul Gilbert defines compassion as the sensitivity to suffering in self or others with a commitment to alleviate or prevent it. And this conceptualization sees compassion as both a skill and an intrinsic motivation that can allow one to break cycles of rumination and down-regulate negative emotional cascades that result from self-criticism. Therapeutically, the important thing here is the ability to engage with one's own suffering, so the suffering in oneself that is often underlying trauma or feelings of anger, rage, depression, anxiety, is being able to actually detect and have a sensitivity to that suffering that is in their self. And then with a commitment to try and alleviate that suffering. And therapeutically, usually this takes the form of, self-forgiveness, self-kindness, trying to reduce that self-criticism. And this is really the focus of compassion-focused therapy. So compassion-focused therapy sees compassion as a skill that can be honed, and it builds capabilities to reduce the barriers to effective emotion regulation. It's been shown many times over to reduce psychopathology such as depression and anxiety, and importantly, it really helps prevent remission of those symptoms. And in young people as well, it's been shown to reduce callous traits and disruptive behavior, and has been shown to be effective in both adults and adolescents. Of course, the issue here is that access to therapy is extremely limited. Only about 14% of people in Australia who seek support actually end up receiving professional mental health support. Further, the average number of sessions that someone engages in therapy with is typically only, on average, 3.9 sessions. But this average can be misleading, and it can be highly skewed by the number of people who have ongoing therapy. Whereas, in fact, the one most frequent number of treatments that people receive is a single session. And this has led to the development of what's called single session interventions. And the idea is to specifically structure programs to maximize the effect of just a single therapeutic encounter, as this is, for many people, the most encounters in a therapeutic session that they will receive. Importantly, these are designed to be standalone, barrier-free supports. They can often be self-guided, so it can be used as self-guided homework as an adjunct to other support. It can complement longer term care, or it can be used as support while people are on healthcare wait lists, which in Australia are absolutely booming at the moment. Importantly, meta-analyses have shown that single session interventions in youths can be almost as effective as full-length interventions. So in the blue bars here are the effect sizes for single session interventions, and in the red bars are full-length interventions. So these are interventions that might have 8+ encounters with the client. So these are extremely powerful interventions, considering that they are light touch, one session interventions. In our IBI project, what we're interested in doing is applying the underlying principles of compassion-focused therapy in a single session intervention. Once we've made a kind of prototype of a single session intervention, we're interested in co-designing with young people in the IBI to target an approach that works best for them, but also co-designing with Anglicare staff to help target stress and burnout. So far, we have already finished our prototype SSI. It's got some pretty schmick graphics, it's pretty engaging, and it follows the what's called the best principles for single session intervention development. And these best principles briefly are a basis in brain science. So this makes SSI's messages easier for participants to understand, as it's based on universal experiences, and has an emphasis on the ability to grow and change. E is for empowering the client, and this is to strengthen and deepen feelings of competence, agency, and relatedness, which are considered essential for social emotional outcomes. S stands for saying is believing. So within the SSI, activities are designed to promote internalization of new beliefs or ideas. And this is usually achieved via self-persuasive writing exercises embedded in the intervention. And finally, SSIs use testimonials because these appear to have more pronounced effects on narratives when they come from peers. So these testimonials are from peers within the target audience. So as I said, we've already created our prototype compassion-focused single session intervention, and we've already begun qualitative interviews with IBI clients to understand their perspective on what compassion is. Our next steps are to then disseminate the prototype SSI to staff and clients within the IBI and collect their qualitative experiences around the messaging and the language used. And the idea here is we want to have a generalized framework of a shared language between both staff and clients to facilitate ongoing conversations from the learnings that people might get from these SSIs. In the future, our big idea plans are to look at the longer term outcomes from single session intervention implementation in staff and clients in the IBI and develop a larger framework where SSIs can be adapted for other clientele groups and other services in Anglicare. So that's it from me. I'm just representing a much larger group. So I'm representing today Associate Professor James Kirby, who is the head of the Compassionate Mind Research Group, our PhD candidate, Dylan Maloney-Gibb, who some of you may know. This is really his brainchild, his passion project, and he's doing the majority of the legwork here. So, you know, massive props go out to Dylan. Also, Dr. Sasha Lin, who is a clinical psychologist and education expert consulting on this project, and of course, our partner at Anglicare, Tani Ledgerwood. Thank you very much for listening today, and please feel free to forward on or ask any questions, time permitting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chase. That was a fantastic teaser for a bigger project, and we will look forward to a much longer presentation later in the year. I just want to say thank you so much. Just looking at the time here, unfortunately, we don't have too much time for questions. We will be following up soon with a link to the recording. So please, you know, if you've got comments, if you've got feedback or questions, please make sure that you pass those on. It's been, I've really enjoyed today's presentations, and just would like to say thank you so much to all of you. It's been great working in partnership with UQ and a whole range of different levels. We're looking forward to the future as well. So thank you again, and we hope to see you at future webinars. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.